Making roast tomato and mascarpone soup, and this is how you do it. Begin by taking 1 kilo of tomatoes and tip them into a roasting tray. Now take 2 cloves of garlic, I'm going to crush them and remove the skins. Roughly chop the garlic and add it into the same tray as your tomatoes. Now we're going to pour over 3 tablespoons of olive oil. Add in some herbs. You could use thyme or rosemary. Today I'm using rosemary. Give a generous season of salt and pepper. Place them in the oven at 220 degrees C until they burst and release all of those delicious juices. Now these have been in the oven for about 50 minutes. You can see they're all juicy and breaking down and the skins are burst. At this point, you want to put them into the pan. Place the pan over a low heat. Top it up with 600 ml boiling water. Give it a stir and let it simmer for about 10 minutes. I'll pick out any of the woody herbs if you've used them. Turn off the heat, and now we're going to blend it using a stick blender. Pass the soup through a sieve just to get out any of the herbs that might be in there or any of the skins that might be a bit rough, and that way we're going to end up with a lovely silky smooth tomato soup. Now we're going to pour the soup back into the pan and place it back over a low heat. Now stir in 2 tablespoons of mascarpone cheese. Add in 1 tablespoon of sherry vinegar, give it a little stir and simmer it for about 5 to 10 minutes. Don't forget to season to taste before serving. Banging. Serve with a nice spoonful of mascarpone. But if you're feeling extra indulgent, you can give it a nice little swirl of cream as well. There you have it, that's my roast tomato and mascarpone soup. It's silky smooth, it's warming, it's delicious, and you really need to try it. This week we're making leek and potato soup, and this is how you do it. We're going to start by preparing 3 leeks. Now they always need a good wash because a lot of sand and dirt gets stuck between the leaves. So a good way to do that is to take your leek and start at the root end, but not right at the very bottom so it's still attached, and slice right through the centre so it opens up like this. You can then rinse that under the tap and it gets between all of the leaves. Do that with all 3 leeks. Now take one of your leeks and cut it in half. We're going to save half for a lovely little garnish later. Roughly chop your leeks. Place a pan over a medium heat. And add into the pan 50 grams of butter. Now add your leeks into the pan. Pinch of salt. This helps to draw out the moisture from the leeks so they cook down and go nice and tender. We're going to give it a stir and cook that for about 5 minutes. In the meantime, we can prepare the potatoes. Hard to say. Now I'm going to peel 500 grams of potatoes and then thinly slice them. Just simply cut them in half lengthways and then just slice them up into 1/2 centimetre slices. It's not too important, but it just helps it cook a little bit quicker. Now you can see that the leeks have now softened up and they've almost reduced by about half the size they originally were. We're now going to add in the potatoes. Pour in 1 litre of vegetable stock. Bring this to a gentle simmer. We're going to cook it for about 10 to 15 minutes, just until the potatoes are nice and soft. Okay, so this has been simmering away for about 15 minutes and the potatoes are lovely and tender and falling apart. So at this stage, I'm just going to give it a nice little season with some sea salt and a little bit of black pepper. And then we're going to turn it off the heat and get ready to blend. I'm going to blend it using a stick blender, but you could use a normal standard blender if that's all you have, but maybe let it cool down a little bit first to avoid any injuries. This is the point where I'm going to add in 200 ml of double cream, but if you want to keep it dairy free or if you're vegan, eat it just as it is. You don't need to add this. And if you, at the beginning, sweat it off in a little bit of olive oil instead of butter, then you've got a perfectly good leek and potato soup. But I'm going to richen it up a little bit with some double cream. Turn the heat back on just for about 5 minutes so everything can warm through again while we prepare the garnish for the top. With that leek that we put to one side earlier on, we're going to slice it up nice and thin and dip it in some corn flour and deep fry it so we have some beautiful crispy leeks to put on the top of the leek and potato soup. I'm going to lay the leek flat side down, and then I'm going to put my knife on an angle and thinly slice it, or as thin as you can anyway. Now place the leeks into a bowl, put in about a tablespoon of corn flour, and then just mix everything together so those leeks are nicely coated in the corn flour. Place a pan of oil over high heat, ready for deep frying. Make sure you've got a plate with some kitchen paper on before you start. Deep fry them in small batches because they can bubble up a little bit, so you just want to be really careful. Just do them in small batches. When they stop bubbling, it means it's time for them to come out. Just place them onto the plate with the kitchen paper and do your next batch. That half a leek made all of those. Alright, the last thing to do is finish them with a good sprinkle of salt and then give them a try. And honestly, I could just eat them like this as a snack, never mind putting them on top of your soup. As always, don't forget to taste it and check the seasoning before you serve it. Now adjust it with salt and pepper if you need to. To serve, ladle in your soup. And simply top it off with a good bunch of those crispy leeks. So there it is, that's my leek and potato soup with crispy leeks on top for a little garnish there. I can't think of a better soup that's more comforting in the winter months. This week we're making a rich and creamy garlic and mushroom soup, and this is how you do it. Take 500 grams of mushrooms, any mushroom of your choice really. I'm just using a chestnut mushroom, and then you want to clean them, but there's an ongoing debate whether you can wash them or whether you just brush them or whatever. Now the reasons why you might not want to wash them is because they do absorb the water like a sponge. So with these we're going to roast them, so we kind of want them to dry out and dehydrate a little bit. So for that reason I'm just going to brush mine. So take a pastry brush and then just brush where you see any of the dirt, and then clean them up that way. But if you prefer to wash them, then feel free to do that too. Now take your mushrooms and slice them nice and thin. Give them a push down like this, and then they just stay nice and flat so they don't slip. Place all of the mushrooms into a mixing bowl. Add into the bowl 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 teaspoon of dried thyme, use fresh if you've got it, pinch of salt, and a good grind of black pepper. Now mix everything together. Spread the mushrooms out nice and thinly onto a couple of roasting trays. Cut the top off your garlic. Place onto some foil. Drizzle with a teaspoon of olive oil. Season with a pinch of salt and a small grind of black pepper. Wrap up the bulb of garlic. Place it onto one of the trays with the mushrooms. Place these in the oven to roast at 200 degrees C for 45 minutes. So as you can see now, the mushrooms have really reduced down in size, they've crisped up and they've developed a whole load of flavour. Now if you look at the garlic, that should have gone nice and soft and sticky as well. See how it just pops straight out? That's going to have a lovely sweet flavour within the soup as well. Place the saucepan over medium heat. Add into the pan 25 grams of butter. Then add into the butter the mushrooms and squeeze in all of that delicious, sweet, sticky garlic. Add into the pan 200 ml of white wine and then reduce this down until it's half the size, so reduce by half. Now once the wine is reduced down by half, add in 500 ml of vegetable stock. Bring to a simmer and cook for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, add in 200 ml of double cream and simmer for a further 5 minutes. Roughly chop a small handful of fresh parsley. After 5 minutes of simmering the soup, it's time to turn it off and start blending. As always, don't forget to taste it and check the seasoning before you serve it. And if you need to, just do it with a little pinch of salt and pepper. To serve, ladle your soup into your bowl. Finish it with a swirl of cream and a good sprinkle of fresh parsley. So that is how you make my rich and creamy garlic and mushroom soup. I really hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you try it out for yourself at home. This week we're making French onion soup and this is how you do it. So for this recipe you need for this recipe you need 1 kilo of brown onions. Now we're going to remove the top and the tail and then we're going to cut them in half, remove the skin and thinly slice them. So take your onion, cut off the top and the root, lay it flat and cut in half, and that makes it easier to remove the skin. Once the skins are removed, lay it flat side down and you want to cut it with the cross section pointing forward, so you go around and you end up with lovely little half moon shaped slices, just like this. So carry on slicing until you get 2/3 of the way through, lay it flat again and finish off your slicing. So one more time, slice, 2/3, lay flat and finish it off. Now place a heavy pan over medium heat. Add into the pan 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 30 grams of butter. Once the butter is melted, add in all of those sliced onions. Now add into the pan a big pinch of salt. Now this is quite important because the salt helps to draw out the moisture out of the onions, which helps them caramelise. Now we're going to sweat down these onions until they go a deep dark mahogany colour. Now that is the caramelisation and the natural sugars that are coming out of it, which is key to the flavour of this soup. You want to keep them moving and every couple of minutes just keep coming back and give it another little stir. Okay, so that's about the stage that we want to take it to. You can see it's a nice dark colour. You probably could take it a bit further, but I'm getting a little bit impatient now and I want to get making the rest of the soup. Now, This has taken roughly around 30 to 40 minutes actually to reach this stage. You know, you've got to be very patient to make this, but you've got to trust me here, it's truly worth it for that flavour that it builds by caramelising the onions like this. It's not where all of the flavour happens, of course, because now we're going to add in a whole new layer of flavours right now. We're going to crush in 2 cloves of garlic, add in 8 to 10 sprigs of thyme. I've tied them together with a little bit of string there because that just makes it easier to take the stalks out later when we are ready to serve. So they'll go straight in as well. And then we're going to go in with 250 ml of dry white wine. That's going to help deglaze the pan and get all of that beautiful caramelised onion from the bottom as well to add into there. So at this stage we turn the heat up just a little bit, so we're on about medium high. We'll reduce that wine down by half the amount. So now that wine is reduced down by half, we're going to go in with 1.5 litres of beef stock. Give that a little stir, and then we just want to bring that back up to a simmer. And then we'll let that tick over for about 10 to 15 minutes while we make the beautiful cheesy croutons that are going to go on the top. Okay, for the cheesy croutons, I've got a couple of kind of baguettes that I baked earlier on, but just pick up whatever bread you like from the shop, and then I'm going to cut this into slices and then brush it with a little bit of olive oil and then roast it in the oven. So I've preheated the oven to 210 degrees C. I'm now going to slice up these baguettes. You know, slice them nice and chunky, good inch thick. You know, you don't want to skimp on this. Okay, so next take all your slices of bread and we're just going to spread them out on a baking tray. Brush the bits of bread with a little bit of olive oil on each side. So we'll go around, brush all of them, flip them over and brush them again. Now place these into the hot oven for 5 to 10 minutes until they go golden and crisp. You want them so they're toasted enough that they're robust and they can sit in that soup without going soggy and falling apart. Beautiful. Now, as always, one of the last things to do is to taste it, to check the seasoning. And if you need to, adjust it with a little bit of salt and pepper. To serve, take a couple of oven-proof dishes. Remember to remove the bunch of thyme, and then ladle your onion soup into the dishes. And don't be shy, fill them right up. And take a couple of your nice crunchy croutons and pile them up with Gruyere cheese or any melting cheese of your choice. We're now going to put these under a hot grill until the cheese is melted. Of course, don't worry if you don't have an oven-proof dish. You can always just take your croutons on a tray, fill them up with cheese, and then place that under the grill or in the oven until they melt, and simply serve them on top of your soup. So there it is, guys, that's how I make my beautiful French onion soup. It's actually really rich in flavour, it's so warming, delicious, quite complex in some of the skills that you need to use to make it, and also in the flavours that are involved in there. It's not the quickest soup I've ever made, but it's definitely worth the time and effort put in to make such a tasty dish. So I hope you try it out for yourselves at home. This week we're making a delicious pearl barley and kale broth, and this is how you do it. We're going to start by taking one large onion or two small onions and dicing them into 1/2 centimetre squares. So to do that, I cut my onion in half, remove the top, and then take off the skin, leaving the roots still attached. Slice right through, not cutting through the root, stop before the root, do that twice, and then 1/2 centimetre cuts down, and then across. And that way you end up with your lovely dice, just like that. Next you want to take 2 carrots, peel them, and then we're going to dice them to the same size as the onion. Cut off both ends, and slice down into 3 strips. Then take your carrot strips and slice into 3 across as well. Just take your time. The same with this one. Then line them up and just chop them into dice. And then we're going to do the same again with some celery. Just use 1 large stick of celery. I'm at the end of my bunch here, so I've got 2 little sticks, and I'm going to leave the leaves on as well and chop them into it. If you don't like the leaves, then feel free to take them out. I quite like them, so I'm going to leave them in. Now place a pan over medium heat. Add in 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Then add in the onions, carrots and the celery. Followed by a generous season of salt. This helps to draw out the moisture and allows the vegetables to sweat down nicely without catching and burning on the bottom. We're now going to saute the veg down for 5 minutes, just until it goes a little bit soft and transparent. Okay, so the veg has been sweating down for about 5 minutes now, and you can see there that the onions are starting to look transparent and everything's softened up a little bit. We haven't put any browning on there, we haven't put any colour on there, because we don't want that sort of flavour. We just want a nice, delicate, gentle flavour. Next we're going to crush in 2 cloves of garlic and then cook it for 1 minute. Now we're going to pour in 1.2 litres of vegetable stock. Turn the heat up and bring to the boil. Okay, so now the stock has come to the boil. It's time to add in 100 grams of pearl barley. So we'll reduce the heat down to like medium-low and place a lid on, and then simmer it for 45 minutes. So the soup has now been simmering for 45 minutes, and it's time to add in the kale. We have 150 grams here. We're just going to tip it in on top, give it a little stir, and then put the lid back on and cook for a further 5 minutes. We're going to let the steam do the work, wilt down the kale, and then when we come back we can stir it in properly. Okay, 5 minutes later and the kale should have wilted down now, so we can just stir that in, stir that through the broth. So there's one last thing to do before we serve it, and that's to taste it and check the seasoning. And then you'll need adjusting with a little bit of salt and as much black pepper as you like. To serve, simply ladle it into your bowl. Finish with a little extra black pepper, if that's what you like. I like it quite peppery. So that's how you make my pearl barley and kale broth. It's warming, it's hearty, it's delicious, and it's so nutritious for this time of year. I really do think you should try it out for yourselves at home. This week we're making a spiced butternut squash soup with coconut milk, and this is how you do it. Okay, so I'm going to start by preparing the butternut squash. What I'm going to do is remove the top, the bottom, and then peel it, and then just roughly chop it. It's really not important how we chop this because everything's going to get blended at the end, so we're just going to chop it so they're all roughly equal sizes. Now you can use a peeler to peel the butternut squash, but I prefer to use a knife, but I just thought I'd show you here how it's done with a peeler, and then I'll show you how I do it with a knife. So when preparing it with the knife, what I do is remove the top and the bottom, and then this bit here, the larger half, is where the seeds are stored. So I go just above there and I cut that in half, just like that. And then I use my knife and I just follow down and remove the skin. And then at the end you can go around and just get any of the little bits you've missed. So now we're going to remove the seeds out of this, so we'll just cut that in half, and then you can see that the seeds are in there. At that point you can just use a spoon and go in and just scoop them out just like that. Now I'm just going to keep these seeds and put them to one side because I plan to use these later on. Now unfortunately this squash doesn't have too many seeds in, but we'll see what we can do and we'll try and use them later. So now we're just going to roughly chop our butternut squash. I'm going to cut it in half, then lay it flat side down, and then just cut it into 1 centimetre ish slices, and that'll do for me. I'm not too fussy about how we're going to cut this. And with this one, because it's got the cavity there, we'll just literally go straight down into the 1 centimetre slices. I'm going to take this saucepan and I'm just going to place the butternut squash straight into there. Now next I'm just going to take 1 onion, and I'm very simply just going to cut that in half and into quarters, and then just peel away the skin just like so. And once the skin is removed, I'm going to remove the top and the root on all 4, and then these leaves will simply just go into the pan and they'll break down like just like that. That's exactly what we want. So we're just going to put them straight into the saucepan with the butternut squash. And next we're going to take 1 red chilli. Now it's up to you at this point. If you want it really spicy, you can leave the seeds in, or of course you can remove the seeds, but I'm going to leave the seeds in, and all I'm going to do is remove the top again and then cut this into 4 with the seeds intact, and then just pop that into the pan as well. So next I'm going to take 3 cloves of garlic, and I'm just going to crush them, remove the skins, and then place them into the pan. So now we're just going to take a 2 centimetre piece of fresh ginger and peel it. So the best way I find to do that is to take the normal teaspoon and then just pull down, and it removes the skin without removing too much of the flesh, so you're not really getting much wastage when you do it like this. Now you can see it's just coming off. I'm just going to roughly slice that up and place that into the pan with the rest of the ingredients. Okay, so now I'm just going to place this onto the hob, and then we're going to add in 400 ml of coconut milk, followed by 600 ml of water. We're then going to season generously with a big pinch of salt and a few grinds of black pepper. We then turn this on onto a medium heat, and bring it up to a simmer. Okay, so once the soup comes to the boil just like this, we're then just going to turn the heat down nice and low, and we're going to simmer that for roughly around 20 to 25 minutes until the squash is tender. As soon as the squash is soft, we're going to blend it until it's smooth. So if you remember, I put some squash seeds to one side at the beginning of the video, and so what I'm going to do next is clean them in a bit of cold water, and then I'm going to pat them dry between some kitchen paper. Once they're dry, I'll show you what we're going to do with them next. So now I'm going to place the seeds into a little dish here. Now that they're dry, give them a very small drizzle, roughly around a teaspoon of olive oil, and season them with a little bit of salt and a little bit of black pepper. Now I'm just going to give these a mix around so they're completely coated in the oil and the salt and pepper. And then we're going to toast them. Now you can do that two ways. You can do it on a baking tray in the oven, roughly around 180 degrees C for about 20 minutes, or you can do them in a frying pan, which will be much quicker, but you've got to keep them moving and you've got to keep an eye on them. So you do whichever way works best for you. Okay, so the soup has now been simmering for roughly around 20 minutes. The important fact there is that the squash is now completely soft and tender, which is the sign that it's time to blend the soup. So we turn it off the heat, and then I'm just going to blend it using a stick blender, but you can use a standard blender or a smoothie maker, but maybe allow the soup to cool down a little bit first before you put it in one of the standard mixers. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is squeeze in the juice of one lime. So now I'll just stir that lime juice in, and then we need to taste it, and that's to check the seasoning. Wow, that lime juice has really lifted the flavour, but it does need a bit more salt, so I'm going to go in with a little pinch and a little bit of pepper, but there's actually quite a quick kick there from the chilli, so we don't want to add too much extra pepper in there. Okay, to serve, we're just going to ladle into the bowl. And finish with a few extra bit of red chilli if you're brave enough. A little sprinkle of those delicious toasted pumpkin seeds. And then just finish it with some greenery of your choice. Some coriander or cilantro works really well. I've got some fennel tops here, so I'm going with that. So that's how I make my spicy butternut squash soup with coconut milk. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that you try it out for yourselves at home. Now you've got to be careful there, it is a little bit spicy, so watch what you're doing with that red chilli. This week we're making a green lentil and vegetable broth, and this is how you do it. So we're going to start by preparing the vegetables. We've got one medium onion, one large carrot, one stick of celery, one small leek, and 2 cloves of garlic. We're going to peel and dice the onion, peel and dice the carrot, dice up the celery stick, finely slice the leek, and then peel and finely slice the garlic. Now place a saucepan over medium heat and add in 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil. Once the oil's hot, it's time to add in the onions, carrot, leek and celery. Leave the garlic out for now. Add in a little pinch of salt. This helps to draw out the moisture, because we're going to cook these for about 5 minutes until they go soft and the onions are transparent. Okay, the vegetables have been cooking for about 5 minutes and the onions are now transparent and the other veg is soft. At this point we're going to add in the sliced 2 cloves of garlic, and then we'll take 1 bay leaf, give it a little tear and pop that in as well. Cook the garlic out for 2 minutes before the next stage. Now we'll pour into the pan 1 litre of vegetable stock. Now turn the soup up, and then we're going to bring that to the boil. When it comes to the boil, we'll add in 100 grams of green lentils. Place the lid on and cook 25 to 30 minutes until the lentils are tender. So after 30 minutes or so of cooking, the lentils should be tender. And then it's time just to taste it and give it a little season to make sure it's to your taste. Give it a little pinch of salt. You can grind a black pepper if it's needed. And then finish it with about a tablespoon of chopped parsley. Give everything a good stir. And then it's time to serve. To serve, ladle your soup into the bowl. And remember to take that bay leaf out. And serve with some good crusty bread. So that's how I make my green lentil and vegetable broth. It's really good for you, it's packed full of veggies, and it's also got all those lentils in there that are full of protein, so it is really a lunch that will set you up for the day. A delicious Chinese inspired chicken noodle soup, and this is how you do it. Okay, so for the first stage of this soup, we've got these beautiful dried shiitake mushrooms, and what we need to do with them is rehydrate them. So we're going to place them in a bowl with 1,400 mils of water, and we're going to leave that for a minimum of 4 hours, but ideally you'd do this the day before and leave it overnight until the shiitake mushrooms have rehydrated and are nice and plump, ready to make your soup. Next we'll place a saucepan onto the stove top, and then we're going to pour in the mushrooms and the liquid, being very careful not to tip in any of the sediment that might have settled at the bottom of the bowl. That's going to be our poaching liquor for the chicken and for the rest of the soup. We're then going to add in 2 chicken legs. These are the full leg with the thigh still attached. We're going to pop them straight into the pan. We're then going to put the pan onto a high heat and bring it to the boil. As soon as it comes to the boil, we'll turn that heat right down, and you'll notice that some foam will come to the top of the soup. At that point we just need to skim that off with a ladle. Once we've removed any of the foam that settles on top of the soup, we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of rice wine, 4 slices of fresh ginger, and the white parts of 2 spring onions. Don't waste the green bits, we're going to slice them up for garnish at the end. We will now cover the soup and leave it to gently simmer for 30 minutes. Okay, so the soup has now been simmering for 30 minutes. The next step is to take out the chicken and put that on a plate to cool down a little bit so we can handle it. And then we're going to discard the spring onion and the slices of ginger from the broth. Next we're going to put a pan of salted boiling water on the hob to cook the noodles. Now we need to season the soup, and we're going to do that by adding in 2 tablespoons of light soy sauce, half a teaspoon of salt, 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground white pepper, and half a teaspoon of sesame oil. And of course, make sure to taste it, because you can adjust it with any of those ingredients if you need to. Delicious. For the noodles, I'm using these rice stick noodles because I think they're perfect for soups, and they're actually really tasty. But you can use any noodles that you like, and then just cook them as they say on the packet instructions. For these it's going to be roughly around 5 minutes, and then for the final minute I'll add in my pak choy just to blanch it. All I'm going to do with that is simply cut it in half and place it in the water 1 minute before the noodles are done, and then we'll serve everything together at the same time. For the chicken, all we're going to do is remove the skin and then simply pick it down using either our hands or maybe a couple of forks, whatever you feel more comfortable with. Now it's time to drain the noodles and pak choy. And now it's time to serve. Begin by placing some noodles in the bottom of the bowl. And then lay over some of that pak choy. Pile it up with some chicken. And then 3 or 4 of those beautiful shiitake mushrooms. And then, not forgetting, topping it up with that delicious broth. little sprinkle of those spring onions. And if you're feeling extra brave, you can finish it with some of the super vibrant chili oil. So that's how I make my Chinese inspired chicken noodle soup. I really hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you try it out. This is not just a soup, it's a full meal in a bowl. It's absolutely delicious and it's full of those amazing umami flavours. I really hope you do try it out yourself. This week we're making a delicious celeriac and apple soup. This is how you do it. So as we always do, we're going to start by preparing the vegetables. For this recipe we're going to need 2 medium onions and we're going to peel and dice them. And then we're going to peel and dice 1 whole celeriac. It doesn't really matter how big you cut these vegetables, just as long as they're all roughly around the same size, especially the celeriac and the apple. And peel and dice 2 apples. You can use any apples of your choice, but I recommend just a nice eating apple that you like to eat. Just choose your favourite and go with that. Now we'll place a saucepan over medium heat and add in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Then we'll add in the onions, followed by a pinch of salt. And then we'll sweat that down for roughly 2 to 3 minutes until they go a little bit soft and transparent. Once they go soft and transparent, we'll then add in the celeriac and the diced apple. Now we're going to add in 1 litre of boiling water and then we'll place the lid on and allow it to simmer for roughly around 20 minutes until the celeriac is tender. Okay, so while the soup is simmering away, we're just going to make a nice little topping to finish it off. So for that I'm going to toast off some crushed hazelnuts with a little bit of garlic. And then we're going to stir that through some olive oil with some freshly chopped parsley. And then we'll just drizzle that over the top right at the end. So now we've been cooking the soup for about 20 minutes and the celeriac is now tender. We're going to take it off the heat, add in 200 ml of milk and then blend it until it's completely smooth. As always, the next step is to taste and season the soup. We're just going to do that very simply with salt and pepper. So give it a taste and then adjust the seasoning to your personal taste. And now it's time to serve. To serve, simply ladle the soup into the bowl. And then finish with that delicious toasted hazelnut, garlic and parsley oil. So there it is, that's how you make a lovely celeriac and apple soup. And then we've finished that with a delicious toasted hazelnut, garlic and parsley oil. Honestly, you can't beat it. It's full of earthy flavours, but also nice bright tangy flavours coming from the apple. You should really go out and give it a go this winter. Today we're making broccoli and Stilton soup. Begin by placing a pan onto the stove and add in 1.5 litres of water. We'll lightly season it and then we'll bring that to the boil. And while that's coming to the boil, we'll prepare the vegetables. We've got 1 head of broccoli and we'll remove the florets and then just cut them so they're all equal sizes. And we're not going to waste the stalk. We'll peel the stalk and then we'll roughly chop that up too. Next, we need to roughly dice 2 small onions or 1 large onion and 3 spring onions. Now that the pan of water has come to the boil, we're going to add in the broccoli, just the florets, not the stalk, and then we're going to cook that until it's tender. That'll take roughly 3 to 5 minutes and then we're going to remove them and we're going to place them into a bowl of cold water. That's going to stop the cooking and then that's what's going to keep it super green. Now remove the water from the pan, but don't throw it away. We need to keep that because that's going to be the main stock that's going into our soup. So put that to one side, place the pan back on the hob and throw in 25 grams of butter. Make sure the pan's over a medium-high heat and then once the butter's melted, add in your onions, your spring onion, the broccoli stalk and 1 clove of peeled garlic. Don't worry about dicing it because we're going to blend it all at the end anyway. Cook these out for roughly around 5 minutes until the onion starts to go transparent and a little bit soft. Now that the onions and the rest of the vegetables are soft, we can add back in that water. That's the original cooking water that we cooked the broccoli in at the beginning. We add that in, bring it to the boil, and then we'll add in the already cooked broccoli florets. Once it comes to the boil and the broccoli's warmed through, you can then add in 150 grams of Stilton. And then we're going to blend it until it's completely smooth using the stick blender. Once it's smooth, season it to your personal taste with a little bit of salt and pepper. So just add a little bit at a time, because remember, once it's in, you can't take it back out again. Add a little bit at a time until it tastes how you like it. To serve, ladle it into a bowl and then sprinkle it with a little bit extra Stilton if that's what you like. So that's how I made my broccoli and Stilton soup. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and hit subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to learn how to make plenty more soups, then you can check out this playlist up here. Thanks for watching.